Hi friends, welcome to our YouTube channel SNS World. So today we are going to understand an ICSE short story, A Face in the Dark, which is written by Ruskin Bond. So before understanding about the story, we have to understand about the author. We have to know about the author. So let's start. About the author. Ruskin Bond was born on 19 May 1934 in a military hospital to Edith Clark and Aubrey Bond in Kaushalli, Himachal Pradesh. His siblings were Ellen and William. Ruskin's father was with the Royal Air Force from 1939 till 1944. When Bond was 8 years old, his mother separated from his father and married to Punjabi Hindu Hari. Bond spent his early childhood in Jamnagar, Gujarat and Simla. At the age of 10, Ruskin went to live at his grandmother's house in Dehradun after his father's death that year from jaundice. Ruskin was raised by his mother and stepfather. He did his schooling from Bishop Cotton School in Simla, from where he graduated in 1950 after winning several writing competitions in the school, including the Irving Divinity Prize and the Halley Literature Prize. He wrote one of his first short stories, Untouchable, at the age of 16 in 1951. Most of his works are influenced by life in the hill stations at the foothills of the Himalayas, where he spent his childhood. His first novel, The Room on the Roof, was written when he was 17 and published when he was 21. It was partly based on his experiences at Dehradun in his small rented room on the roof and his friends. His earlier works were written without being meant for any particular readership. His first children's book, The Angry River, in the 1970s, second being The Blue Umbrella, had its writing toned down on a publisher's request for a children's story. When writing for children, he said, "I had a pretty lonely childhood and it helps me to understand a child better." Bond's work reflects his Anglo-Indian experiences and the changing political, social and cultural aspects of India. Now we are going to understand about the story. A story is A Face in the Dark that is set in a pine forest outside Simla. It revolves around Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher. He was returning to his school late one night on the outskirts of the hill station of Simla. The Simla Bazaar was about 3 miles from his school. He took a shortcut and was returning through the pine forest. He carried a torch with him. There he saw the figure of a boy in the light of the torch. He found him sitting alone on a rock. He stopped there. He went closer to the boy in order to recognize him and said, "What are you doing out here, boy?" The boy appeared to be crying. His head hung down and he held his face in his hands and his body shook convulsively. It was a strange, soundless weeping. Mr. Oliver felt uneasy. He asked the boy to tell him his trouble and look up. The boy looked up and took his hands from his face and looked up at his teacher. The light from Mr. Oliver's torch fell on the boy's face. It had no eyes, ears, nose or mouth. It was just a round, smooth head with a school cape on top of it. He got frightened and the torch fell from his trembling hand. He turned and ran towards the school building and called for help. He stumbled off to the watchman, gasping for breath. He told the watchman that he had seen something horrible, a boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face. He had no eyes, nose, mouth, nothing. The watchman raised the lamp to his own face. The watchman had no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow, and that's when the wind blew the lamp out. It's a supernatural story, and Ruskin Bond makes the supernatural look natural. Mr. Oliver has a strange experience while he is passing through a pine forest at night. He sees a boy sitting on a rock at night on the narrow path. He fancies that the boy has no eyes, ears, nose or mouth. He gets frightened and runs towards the school building. It is the creation of his own mind. His mind is so gripped with fear that he fancies that the watchman whom he meets has no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. All this makes the story supernatural. Now we are going to understand about the theme of this short story. A Face in the Dark is a supernatural story, and the writer makes the supernatural look natural by his artistic skill. It is set in a pine forest outside Simla. It revolves around Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher. Mr. Oliver has a strange experience while he is passing through a pine forest at night. He sees the figure of a boy in the light of a torch. He stops because he thinks that boys are not supposed to be out after dark. He moves closer to the figure in order to recognize him. The boy appears to be crying. It is a strange soundless weeping. Mr. Oliver feels uneasy, becomes tense, and gets upset. He asks him why he is crying. The boy neither answers nor looks up. Mr. Oliver again asks him to look up. When he looks up, Mr. Oliver fancies that the boy has no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. It is just a round smooth head with a school cap on top of it. He gets frightened and runs towards the school building. It is the creation of his own mind. His mind is gripped with fear. Everything there appears to be strange, mysterious, and supernatural. Mr. Oliver stumbles up to the watchman, gasping for breath. He is so frightened that he fancies that the watchman whom he meets has no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. All this makes the story supernatural, but Ruskin Bond's supernatural is neither frightening nor horrifying. Summary: Helpline. The story has its settings on the outskirts of the hill station of Simla. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher, teaching in a school. Mr. Oliver, moving down the narrow forest path with a torch, finds a boy sitting on a rock, recognizes the miscreant, sensed that something was wrong. Mr. Oliver felt uneasy, wanted to know the cause of his trouble. The boy's face had no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. Mr. Oliver, a teacher in a school. A Face in the Dark is a short story by Ruskin Bond that revolves around Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher. Mr. Oliver was returning to his school late one night on the outskirts of the hill station of Simla. He had been teaching in a school in Simla that had been run on English public school lines. The Simla Bazaar, with its cinemas and restaurants, was about 3 miles from his school. Mr. Oliver, a bachelor, usually strolled into the town in the evening. He would return after dark and take a shortcut to the pine forest. A boy sitting on the rock. When there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad eerie sounds that kept most people to the main road. But Mr. Oliver was not a nervous or imaginative man. He was moving down the narrow forest path. He carried a torch and its gleam. The batteries were running down, more fitfully down the path. There he saw the figure of a boy in the light of the torch. He found him sitting alone on a rock. He stopped there. He thought that boys were not supposed to be out of the dark. Mr. Oliver recognizes the figure. Mr. Oliver moved closer to the figure in order to recognize the miscreant and said, "What are you doing out here, boy?" He sensed that something was wrong. The boy appeared to be crying. His head hung down and he held his face in his hands and his body shook convulsively. It was a strange soundless weeping, and Mr. Oliver felt uneasy. "Well, what's the matter?" he asked, his anger giving way to concern. "What are you crying for?" The boy neither answered nor looked up, but continued sobbing. He told the boy that he should not go or be out there at that time. He said, "Tell me the trouble. Look up." The boy looked up. He took his hands from his face and looked up at his teacher. The light from Mr. Oliver's torch fell on the boy's face, if you could call it a face. It had no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. It was just a round smooth head with a school cap on top of it. A boy without face. The torch fell from his trembling hand. He returned and scrambled down the path, running blindly through the trees and calling for help. He was still running towards the school building when he saw a lantern swinging in the middle of the path. Mr. Oliver stumbled up to the watchman, gasping for breath. "What is it, Sahib?" asked the watchman. "Has there been an accident? Why are you running? I saw something horrible, a boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face. No face, Sahib? No eyes, no mouth, nothing? Do you mean it was like this, Sahib? Asked the watchman, and raised the lamp to his own face. The watchman had no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow, and that's when the wind blew the lamp out. Character: Mr. Oliver. Mr. Oliver is an Anglo-Indian teacher in a school near Simla. He has been teaching in the school for several years. He is a bachelor and usually strolls in the Simla Bazaar in the evening. While returning after dark, he takes a shortcut to the pine forest. He carries a torch with him. He gets frightened when he sees a boy sitting on a rock in the narrow forest path. He fancies that the boy has no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. It is just a round smooth head with a school cap on top of it. It is the creation of his own mind. His mind is gripped with fear. The torch falls from his trembling hand, and he runs towards the school building. He cries for help. This strange and mysterious experience in the forest makes him sense. He is puzzled and stumbles up to the watchman. He is so gripped with fear that he fancies that the watchman whom he meets has no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. It appears to him that he has had a supernatural experience. Title: The title of the story, A Face in the Dark, is very appropriate because the story revolves around Mr. Oliver and the face of the boy in the dark. Mr. Oliver has a strange experience while he is passing through a pine forest at night. He sees the figure of a boy sitting alone on a rock. He goes closer to recognize the face of the boy. The boy appears to be crying. Mr. Oliver asks him to look up. When he looks up, Mr. Oliver is surprised to find that it has no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. It is just a round smooth head with a school cap on top of it. He gets frightened and the torch falls from his trembling hand. He runs towards the school building and cries for help. He is gripped with fear. So it is the face of the boy in the dark that frightens Mr. Oliver. So the title, A Face in the Dark, is very apt. Setting: The story, A Face in the Dark, is set in a pine forest outside Simla. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher, dared to walk through the pine forest on his way back to the school after an evening at Simla Bazaar. He carries a torch with him. While walking through the narrow forest path, he comes across a weeping boy who lifts his face, which is not a face but a flat something without eyes, nose, or mouth. He gets frightened and the torch falls from his hand. He turns and runs towards the school building. He cries for help. He stumbles up to the watchman, gasping for breath. He tells the watchman that he had seen something horrible, a boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face. He had no eyes, no ears, no features at all. He is so gripped with fear that he fancies the watchman whom he meets has no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. All this makes the setting in the pine forest strange, mysterious, and supernatural. Style: The story is written in the third person, narrated by the omniscient author in a simple and straightforward manner. Very apt and concrete imagery has been employed to bring out the atmosphere of supernaturalism and mystery created in the story, catering especially to the taste of the children. The dialogues are brief and racy, and the descriptions of the scene and setting very graphic and artistic and intelligible. The writer has used language that helps him create an atmosphere of strangeness, mystery, and supernaturalism. The placement of words like said, eerie sounds so convulsively wracked with silent sobbing creates a strange atmosphere. The language is simple but effective in creating a supernatural atmosphere. The reader is impressed by the exactness and preciseness in the use of words. Critical appreciation: Supernaturalism. An atmosphere of strangeness, mystery, and supernaturalism prevails in the story. The story is set in a pine forest outside Simla. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher, walks through the pine forest on his way back to school after an evening at Simla Bazaar. While walking through the forest path, he comes across a weeping boy who lifts his face, which is not a face but a flat something without eyes, nose, or mouth. He gets frightened and the torch falls from his hand. He turns and runs towards the school building. He stumbles up to the watchman and tells him that he had seen something horrible, a boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face. is the creation of his own mind. He is so gripped with fear that he fancies that the watchman has no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. All this makes the story supernatural. Atmosphere of strangeness. In order to create an atmosphere of strangeness, the writer uses the most appropriate and suggestive words in the story. The words in the line, "When there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad, eerie sounds that kept most people to the main road," create an atmosphere of strangeness. The boy sitting alone on a rock in the forest at night looks strange and mysterious. The description, it, the figure of a boy, had no eyes, ears, nose or mouth. It was just a round smooth head with a school cap on top of it, creates a strange, frightening, mysterious and supernatural atmosphere. Glossary. Outskirts, which means parts of the town away from the center. Strolled, which means walked in a relaxed manner. Eerie, which means strange, mysterious, frightening. Nervous, which means anxious about something. Miscreant, which means a person who has done something wrong. Distinctly, which means clearly. Scrambled, which means moved quickly. Stumbled, which means tripped. Gasping, which means breathing in a fast way. Horrible, which means terrible. So this is the short story, A Face in the Dark. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share and comment on this video. And if you are not subscribed our channel, then please subscribe our channel and hit the bell icon to never miss an update from this channel. So thank you for watching this live stream. Okay, bye bye and have a nice day.